Off the hook. Clearly, I'm a popular guy
Okay.
today.
Yeah, one of those days. You have a few minutes for
Yes,
me?
I do.
10 minutes or something?
Yes, I do.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna record this if you don't mind, just for my
Okay.
notes. Okay, great. So yeah, we're just this is for today's Parent Magazine, and we're writing, I guess, sort of the service article version of the dropping mask mandates, which is, if you're a parent
Yep.
in one of these areas like Ontario that's about to drop a mask mandate, what should you do? Like, what are your how do you personally decide,
Yeah.
whether to send your kid in a mask or not? So maybe I can just start with that really broad question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Do you have any advice for parents in, a week
Well,
or two, or I guess in
first
Alberta
is
right now, who are
yeah.
deciding this?
I have a child under 5 who can't be vaccinated, so
Mm-hmm.
this is something that preys on my mind. My spouse is a doctor, and she and I have been trying to guess what is the rate of people who will choose to wear masks even after the mandate has fallen. She
Mm-hmm.
thinks it will be a high number. I think it will be a low number. She's usually right about these things, so we'll see what happens. Um,
Are you in Ontario? Just
I'm in Ontario,
for context. Okay, yeah.
so um, and regardless of what happens, I think a fair proportion of people will choose to continue to wear masks. That's important
Mm-hmm.
that that they have that power, because if everyone
Mm-hmm.
else continues to make bad choices around them, wearing a mask is still a good idea. It's the last line of defense, and if it's a good N95 respirator mask, then it provides some pretty good inward protection. So, if you are a parent of an unvaccinated child, as I am, then
Mm-hmm.
you want as many options as possible to prevent your child from being exposed. And that means, hopefully, having everyone in your life vaccinated, everyone in the child's life vaccinated, and and preventing the child from being exposed to the disease, which means preventing you from being exposed to the disease, which means you've got to wear a mask all the time. And anyone that the child comes into contact with should be asymptomatic and probably wearing a mask as well, if they're not in a bubble. Now, if your child is school age,
So
it's
wait. Sorry, I have a question
oh yeah,
about that. So say my daughter's 3,
yeah.
so she's going to daycare. So would you suggest that parents send their daycare-aged kids to school in a mask, like to daycare in a mask?
It's a tough call, right? It comes down to your how well your child tolerates masking. We don't have
Mm-hmm.
my child. My child's 2, doesn't wear a mask. We
Mm-hmm.
may start thinking about that soon. We never tried him on one, and I'm sympathetic to small children who can't wear masks and it might be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather if everyone around them was a
Mm-hmm.
wall of protection.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure everybody at the daycare is triply vaccinated and symptom screened and is rapid tested.
Mm-hmm.
That is the preferred strategy to my mind. Um, if your child
But if,
can't,
yeah, like if your kid, I have sympathies because my daughter too. She just like tore it off her face. It was
yeah,
never on there.
right,
But if they're at the age where they will kind of wear it, um, and they're like 3-year old, I think a bunch of 3-year-olds are wearing them in her class.
yeah,
Do you think it's worth doing?
the bang for your buck, I wonder about, because is the mask wearing, are they wearing it well? Are they wearing consistently? And is it a good
Mm-hmm.
quality mask? So it's
Mm-hmm.
not that the regular surgical masks aren't useful. They do have some utility. It's just that for an airborne disease, it's the N95 or KN95s that have the biggest bang for your buck. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a calculation every parent has to do, saying, is it the stress of the child wearing the mask and the extent of compliance? If the stress is low and the compliance is high, then yeah, it probably is worth it. If, on the other hand, you got to wrestle with your child, if they're not wearing it well and it makes them miserable,
Mm-hmm.
then I think the calculus points towards not compelling them to wear it and putting the onus on everybody around them to do the hard
Mm-hmm.
work. And I think that's what's
Okay.
missing from this
So
conversation. The onus should be on other people, not the child.
yeah, yeah. Can we stick with the little age group for a minute here?
Sure, yeah,
So I know part of it is kind of like, how annoying is it for your kid? How distracting is it for them? But part of it, I would think, like as a parent for a 3-year-old, part of what I think about is, okay, my kid's not seeing other people's faces. She's not seeing their
yeah.
expressions, right? Their feelings and their um, things like that. Like, do you think that, like, I guess I know that's not sort of a personal choice for parents whether other people are going to send their kids to masks, I guess, but is there something to be concerned about developmentally about 3-year-olds
I mean,
being
it's not my
surrounded by a
field,
classroom of
and
math?
I shouldn't opine on
Okay.
something that's outside my field.
No,
It's
that's okay.
something as a parent I
Okay.
think about.
Okay.
Now it's not everyone they see is wearing a mask, just that some of their friends are wearing masks.
Mhm.
And it's not, and on TV people have faces. I know when
Mhm.
my kid sees someone wearing a mask, he says off, 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 because he doesn't like when people wear masks,
Mhm.
but he gets used to it.
Mhm.
Like there was a moment where I was symptomatic. We thought I might be infected. I wasn't, so I wore an
Mhm.
N95 around him all the time. And
Mhm.
he at first said off, off, take that off all the time. Within like a couple hours, I had him drop pictures on the mask, and he's fine. You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
um,
Right. Okay.
so I'm not overly worried about it, to be honest. I
Okay.
think people overstate that kind of thing because we
Okay.
have so many images of faces in our society. They know what a face is.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
that
Okay. Okay,
the,
that's
the
fair.
question
Okay, and
comes
then
down
yeah.
to is there sufficient bang for your buck here? Um,
Mhm.
and I don't know. There are other factors that have to be considered, like how much is the disease raging outside of the
You can't
daycare?
say I don't know.
I know. So
This is what we're calling you for.
right. So
Okay.
here's how you think about it. Here's how you think about it.
Okay.
Um, is there a risk of infection? Well, the risk of
Mhm.
infection is going to vary with the vaccination rate of the adults in the kid's life, the
Mhm.
exposure rate of the adults in the kid's life, and the end of the kid, like how many activities it's doing, how, and most
Mhm.
importantly, what is the prevalence of the disease in the community at the time? Is it
Mhm.
diminishing? Is it exploding? Um,
Mhm.
and are there sufficient symptom checks in the kid's environment? So if you don't have
Mhm.
symptomatic people around you, the risk plummets substantially. Not
Mhm.
entirely, but substantially. If you have other
Okay.
layered effects, like are the adults in the kid's life being rapid tested? Are they not flying
Mhm.
off to Cancun every weekend?
Mhm.
If,
Right.
if there's responsible behavior in addition to formal mitigation measures wrapped around the child, I am not as concerned. Um,
Okay.
I know like my spouse has a lot more concern than I do.
Mhm.
As a physician, she thinks about the individual more so, whereas I think about
Mhm.
the population dynamics. I think the actual risk, if you have these other factors in place, the um, the risk of the child being exposed is low, and once exposed, the risk of a child becoming infected is low, and once infected, the risk of a child having a bad outcome is low. So three low
Mhm.
numbers multiplied by each other gives you a very low number. But the one that you
Mhm.
can control is the risk of exposure. And mask
Mhm.
is just one thing. You have these other tools to apply. If you can
Mhm.
maximize those other tools, then the masking becomes less important.
Right. Okay. Okay, and then sorry, moving on to school age children. So that's kind of a different situation
Yeah,
in your mind.
it
Okay.
is. Yeah. School age children, first of all, can wear masks. They have a lot more autonomy and control. Um,
Mhm.
they have a social life that you can't control. They're hanging
Mhm.
out with their friends. They're going to be in each other's faces a fair amount. They can be vaccinated. Now, depending on where you live, you can have 1 or 2 doses. I'm not sure. I can't keep track of the rules anymore. If young kids can get 2 doses. If you can get 2 doses, get two
I
doses.
think so, yeah.
If you can get
Yeah.
3 doses, get 3 doses.
Right.
So if the kid is doubly vaccinated,
Mhm.
um, and everyone in your life is doubly vaccinated, I don't think there's a substantial risk to the child. I really don't. There's a good
Hmm.
chance to get exposed. There's a very good chance they'll be exposed. Very good chance. There is a smaller chance they'll be infected, but a minute chance that they'll have a bad outcome. And by a bad outcome, I mean serious illness, hospitalization, and knock on wood, death.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
So my personal feeling is I would send my child to school in a mask with the expectation that it would be improperly and inconsistently worn.
Mhm.
But with the vaccination, I am not concerned. I think the times of failure of the mask would be accounted for by the high vaccination rate.
Mhm. And the mask, the benefit of wearing the mask to you?
There is benefit, absolutely, um,
Uh-huh.
but in I'm trying to be a realist, and the older the child, the less likely they're going to be wearing it
Right,
consistently.
right, right, right. But you think that the mask is still worth doing because
Oh,
it has enough
it
value to
definitely
continue
has an
to.
impact. And
Uh-huh.
if we could just put up with this until like the summer, when the case
Uh-huh.
numbers are expected to drop dramatically, then we can probably
Mm-hmm.
do away with the mask entirely by then. You know?
Uh-huh. Okay. Um, so I have a few sort of specific questions. Um, so one is, would you expect your kid to wear a mask outside? Do you think they still have value outside?
Okay. No, not really. I
Okay.
mean, if you're sitting outside with a bunch of people you don't know that well, with your heads together, um, for long periods of time, then there's some utility of wearing a mask. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
just hanging out, going for a walk, you know, watching like a football game or something, and you're not like having your heads close together, then I don't see
Mm-hmm.
a lot of utility. The idea is you have sufficient cross breeds to dilute any virus that might be
Mm-hmm.
there. Now, none of
Like,
these
would you
things
ask your kid to wear a mask during recess?
I would not know.
Okay. Um, and then my other question was about the quality of the masks. Like, I know it feels like in the media, we hear a lot about N95s and why we should all be wearing N95s. And in reality, I live in a pretty progressive part of Toronto, and still, 90% of the kids in my kids' class are wearing Gap double
Yeah,
layered, basic cloth masks, right? And like, not very many kids are wearing N95. Um, so I'm wondering, like, and I do wonder, is this just, like how protective is this, right?
yeah.
Is this just like theater at some
It's
point?
not theater. It's
Um,
not theater.
okay.
So have to ask ourselves, how is this disease transmitted? A combination of
Mm-hmm.
droplet and aerosol transmission. It's actually a spectrum of what constitutes droplet versus aerosol. So if you're further on the droplet end, where the droplets are large, then the cheaper masks work. They sort of cause the droplets to fall closer. They don't do a lot of self-protection. They do a lot of protection of other people. At the
Okay.
aerosol end, the N95s are important because the gas, the mist, doesn't escape, and they're good for self-protection. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I can cite some numbers. We usually think about the time to receive an infectious dose. So if you are in the room with somebody who is infectious and you're wearing an N95, it'll take hours before sufficient viral load accumulates that you will get an infectious dose.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're wearing a crappier mask, it will take less time, possibly minutes. Um,
Right.
but even an aerosol uh, um, disease, there's a plume, an aerosol plume that comes out from the center of your mouth. The crappy mask can mitigate that substantially. They can't mitigate the extraneous stuff that comes off the sides. So
Right.
I've seen some simulation studies suggest that the three-ply masks can reduce transmission by 40%, which is pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the N95s, it can go as high as 90%, not higher. But duration matters. So the extent of time you're spending indoors matters. You don't want to be there for more than a couple hours um, if someone is infectious in that room. But again, you
So if you're
layer this.
really sending your kid in a mask to protect themselves because they have, say, a health condition or something like that,
Yes, absolutely,
then
yes.
and the other kids aren't wearing masks, it becomes sort of increasingly important to go with
Precisely
high
right.
quality.
Especially the
Yeah.
N95. So if you're trying to protect the child and they are
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable, then the
Mm-hmm.
N95 matters. Duration
Okay.
matters. And what's really important is the symptom check matters as well. If you keep symptomatic people
Mm-hmm.
out of the environment, the risk plummets.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Um, and what about like sports and other sort of extracurriculars and things like that?
Yeah, so it comes down to, are you going to be in close prox? It's going to be indoors, first of all. If it's indoors and a lot of people are there huffing and puffing, then wearing a
Mm-hmm.
mask, yeah, probably should happen. It's hard if
Mm-hmm.
you're exerting yourself. It's really hard. I'm sympathetic,
Mm-hmm.
and this probably has to be revisited if it ends up being not possible. But we have the women's
Mm-hmm.
Olympic hockey team who wore N95 masks and won a gold medal
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
against a team that did not wear it consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So it is possible. Is it required? That's the big question here. Um, I think for certain indoor environment, if you're wrestling indoors, I think it's probably
Right.
advisable. If you're playing soccer indoors and you got good ventilation in that room, I think you probably get away with not wearing it. If you're
Right.
outdoors, no, there's no need. There's no need
Okay.
unless you're wrestling
Okay.
outdoors. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so sort of I'm hoping that I have to kind of zoom out a little bit on this. Like, so how should we think about this? Should we think about this as, or how do you think about this? Do you think about this as like the province's raising these things, lifting this mandate too soon, and hopefully we can all just keep wearing masks for another month as a, social good project, and will help everybody along? Are we thinking of this as like, this is increasing the risk to your kid, and you need to, manage that risk by increasing your kid's personal protection? Like, what's kind of the framework that parents should be thinking of this in?
Well, I think politically what's happening is we're downloading risk to the individual and taking responsibility off the plate of the government, which is unfortunate because not everyone has the same capacity to manage this risk at an individual level. We have people who are very vulnerable, people at the low end of the socioeconomic scale. So there's still a role for the state to play here in leveling that playing field. But I think the way that people need to think about it is the government has signaled that they are no longer in the pandemic control business, which is unfortunate. And if that is the case, then I think it's incumbent upon parents to look into which strategies they must invest in if they wish to continue being in the pandemic management game. I'm going to sneeze 1 second. Ooh, sneeze time. So I think a lot of parents, though,
parents
are just eager to follow what public health tells them. I know that my university is eager to do that. Just public health says we don't wear masks, we don't wear masks. Public health says be vaccinated, be vaccinated. And that's the easy way to get through, and that tends to be a legalistic way. Doing public health says you can't be sued. And it's always in our power, though, to do more than what public health says. Public health says, look in the direction of traffic before you cross. Guess what? You have the power to look both ways in one-way street. Probably wise.
Right.
So
do you think the average kid is at enough risk that they need a mask now?
Kids are always have been low risk. Let's be clear about this. I'm not one of those people who says it doesn't happen in kids. Not at all. I'm also not one of those people that says schools are plague central. It's something in between. So kids are a low risk for getting symptomatic disease and of having bad outcomes. Not zero risk, low risk. But it's high enough if you're unvaccinated that I'd be concerned. So if your child is unvaccinated, I would take additional steps to protect them. If your child has been doubly vaccinated, I'm a lot less concerned.
Okay. But you're concerned, like, can we talk about it from a public health, like, from a more like community protecting the other kids in the class?
Yes, totally right. My larger concern is, we have to think about this. There's individual risk and population risk. This disease has always been a population risk crisis. Very little to do with individual risk crisis. There's some individuals who are at risk, the elderly, for example, immunocompromised. But most of us, if we ever got this disease, we have a very high chance of getting through it without much bad outcome, with the exception of long COVID. We have another conversation about long COVID. Nobody fully understands it yet, and maybe it's worthwhile doing everything we can to prevent exposure, just in case it ends up having some long-term disability implications. Okay? And I wish I could offer better guidance on that. I can't. I don't know what the deal is with long COVID. But taking long COVID off the table, the population risk is what we care about here. There's something to be said for the morality of doing what you can so that the kid down the street doesn't get sick and he's immunocompromised. There's something to be said for making sure that you and your strong, healthy, double-vax kid wears a mask so that 5 links on the transmission chain later, the unvaccinated 2-year-old at daycare doesn't get COVID. So there is a responsibility aspect to this that gets lost in the shuffle.
Right. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And sorry, do you have a few more minutes?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So are there any downsides to kids? Like the same question, I guess, as I had about daycare. Are there any downsides developmentally or socially or anything like that to school kids, continuing to wear masks or just wearing masks?
I've not seen any compelling evidence for that.
Okay.
There's all kinds of scary theories in social media. The CDC has I'll send you a link. They have a little summary of the existing evidence, and they have a section on the deleterious outcomes, and they find that there is no compelling evidence for any adverse reactions, whether it's physical, like cardiovascular issues, or psychological, emotional development.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay. So I guess like one of the questions, this is my last question. One of the questions that I'm realizing I am thinking about with this is like I think that part of what's happening is some people see masks as like a pill that you're taking. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
To prevent this disease that like has this little side effect, you know, of these
yes,
social issues or these language issues or whatever, and you kind of want to take it like only until you know the benefit stops outweighing the risks. And some people see masks as like a coat, like something that is totally neutral, you know, and has no basically has no downside that just is protective. And I'm wondering if that makes any sense to you,
that's
and if
interesting.
you
That's interesting.
have like an idea of how you see it. Like, do you see it as completely just a positive thing, and unless your kid is, you know, physically annoyed by it, they could just
Yeah,
wear
I
it
do
forever, and
actually. I
you know,
do. I see it that way because I've not seen any compelling evidence to show that has any negative impact whatsoever, other than the imagined
okay,
negative impact. I
okay,
mean, look, people made similar arguments about condoms at one point, and
hmm,
no one takes those arguments seriously. Um,
right,
you made similar arguments about seatbelts at one point. Oh, it's going to crush my
right,
insides. The
right,
discomfort prevents me from driving well. No, it doesn't.
right,
You know.
right,
So
right.
I think a
Seatbelts
lot of
way
that
too
is, I don't
sensitive.
want to say whining. I think a lot of it
Uh-huh.
is imagined deleterious outcomes to justify using discomfort as a reason not to do something.
Right.
Um,
And for you, where's the line? There is a line though at which
sure,
you
the
think they should
the
come
line
on.
is it is uncomfortable. Like how many
Mhm.
of us when driving half a block don't wear a seatbelt because it's uncomfortable. I've done it, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but there comes a time when you realize, well, the risk is minuscule, therefore there's no need
Mhm.
for it. If
Mhm.
I'm moving the car from this part of the driveway to the other part of the driveway, I'm not wearing a seatbelt because the risk is
Mhm.
close to zero. There'll come a time
Mhm.
when the risk is close to zero. Maybe
Okay.
we're there now. I don't think we are, but we'll get there soon enough. Um,
Mhm.
so it comes down to is the juice worth the squeeze?
Mhm. Yeah.
Right now, the juice is worth
Uh,
the squeeze, but there will come a time when
okay.
it's not.
Okay. And we'll all have to decide for ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and part of that squeeze is the price, the actual numerical
Mhm.
price for the masks. Part of it is the
Mhm.
environmental contamination of people throwing away masks,
Mhm.
um, and part of it is the social discomfort of it. So I mean, it's not zero the social discomfort of it. It's not. There is something to be said for seeing a masked face all the time, being reminded that a respiratory disease is prevalent, and there will come a time when it is not as prevalent, and maybe we should be not thinking about
Mhm. But to your mind, there's no these other the sort of issues that people are thinking about. I think a lot with kids, yeah,
it. Yeah, I mean, like it's
emotional
not my it's
attunement
yeah,
or
it's not my
speech
field of
or learning
expertise.
French or things like
I
that.
don't have
It's not really.
expertise
Yeah.
there. That's
Okay.
psychologists have to comment on that. But the
Okay.
limited data I've seen is not
Yeah.
compelling. I'll send you the CDC summary, and
Right.
you can see the data
Yeah.
yourself.
It's not the squeeze. Okay. Okay. That's great. That's super helpful. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Sorry, I'm kind of
No, no,
steamrolling this conversation.
that's about it.
If you Okay. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Okay, bye bye.
And someone might call you to fact check this.
Okay,
Okay.
sure.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.